Hi, this is Jesna from Edu Maestro. As we all know, English is a universally accepted language. So, in order to get a job or in order to study abroad, we all need to know basic technicalities of English. So, to be communicative, it is the ability, or one should have the ability to communicate to others. So, that means to introduce, or one should have the capability to communicate with each other. So for this, let's move on to tenses. So first of all, to communicate in English, we initially need a basic framework, that is tenses. So we'll move on to tenses, we'll see how it works. So we have 12 tenses, and the first tense is simple present tense. That is, we have to know the rule, that is subject plus V1, base form of the verb. First of all, let's see how these subjects work, like I, we, you, they, both. All these are plural forms, and we have to use have with these forms. Similarly, he, she, it, and with the names and everyone, all these are supported with has. And we use do for the plural forms, does for the singular forms. Plural forms we use do, or as in the negative forms we use don't or do not. Whereas in singular forms we use does, doesn't for negative forms, and does not. The difference between don't, doesn't, these are known as contractions, and these contractions are mostly used for informal letters or informal conversations. Whereas for formal, semi-formal, and for formal essays, we use do not or does not. Another examples are cannot, should not, have not, are not, am, etc. For other contractions, don't, doesn't, can't, shouldn't, mustn't, aren't, am. These kind of contractions can only be used for informal messages or informal letters or for speaking purposes. Now let's move on to tenses. First tense is simple present, that the rule is subject plus verb 1. For example, he writes a letter. He writes a letter. Writes is the V1, first base form of the verb. That is the action. Here the action is writes. So when we use singular forms, the verb has to be in plural form. So when we say he writes a letter, it means the action is happening regularly, or the action happens regularly. When you use it for the negative purpose, you can write he does not write a letter. When you make it as a question tag, you can use does he write a letter? That is the way we use for simple present tense. Next tense, we move on to present continuous tense, that is subject plus am, is, or are plus ing with our base form of the verb. For example, he is writing a letter. Here the action is an ongoing process. So when we can say it into the negative sentence, we can say he is not writing a letter. And when you make into a question tag, you can say like, is he writing a letter? The difference is we use all the auxiliary verbs first when you make it into a question. Now let's move on to the third tense, that is present perfect tense. The rule for present perfect tense is subject plus have or has plus V3. V3 is the third form of the verb or past participle. For example, I have completed the task. Here the action is completed. So here the action you have just completed, that is present perfect tense. So I have completed the task. If you're saying it into the negative sentence, you can say I have not completed the task. And if you're making into the question tag, you can say, you can ask like, have you completed the task? If you're asking another person, you can ask, have you completed the task? Fourth tense is present perfect continuous tense. The rule is subject plus have been plus ing or with the base verb. For example, I have been working in this company for 2 years, or I have been working in this company since 2015. So what is the difference between since and for? Let's see. Since, we use it for a specified time. For example, I have been working in this company since 2015. And if you want to use for, you have to use it with 2 years or 5 years. That is for the length of the time. For example, I have been waiting for him for 5 years or 2 years. Another example, I have been waiting for him since Friday, because Friday you have mentioned or specified the time. Another example again, I have been working in this company since June. She has been eating pizza since morning. I have been waiting for him since 8 o'clock. So here all these dates have been mentioned, so we use since. Whereas if it's not mentioned, and if the time is, or the length of time is being mentioned, then you're supposed to use for. For example, I have been waiting for him for a week or for 2 weeks. I have been working in this company for a month or for 2 months. We are going to Paris for 3 days or for a day.
Edu Maestro Academy, Kakanad, Aluva, Vadudala, Edapalli, Kannur, Trivandrum and Dubai.